Hey, everybody, welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 61. And tonight we return to paragraph 11 as we get to as we look at the penultimate verse. We've been talking about life, the life of the age. And recently, I was surprised to find that we were shifting from one kind of life to another kind of life. Right from the kind of life that was introduced from the beginning in the word of life, and the eternal life here to the psyche, the psyche, which, as we discussed, was probably like this is what Jesus lays down, right? And we were looking at that difference between the word of life, the life being manifested, the life of the age, right? That John has been talking about all the way through, and then how Jesus lays down or sets out his psyche, right? And that we ought to set out our psyche as well. And then, of course, we come to the shocking, well, it's kind of shocking to me, third usage of life. So let's jump ahead and reread the paragraph here, and then well, actually, let me just start with verse 16 here. We know love by this, that he laid down his life, his psyche for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers and sisters. But whoever has worldly goods and sees his brother or sister in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God remain in him? Little children, let's not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. Okay. And so the third life that we get into here, right? So we've had it's it's concealed, like in the English, it's concealed, right? So again, like just a little bit of a review, looking at the Greek, we go back up to verse 14, right? We know that we have passed from Thanatu unto Zoin, from death to life. So we talked about this sort of setting up these parameters, right? So Zoe, that's the life that he was talking about from the beginning. That's the word of life, right? That's the logo of the Zoe. That's the Zoe of the age, right? Is the eternal life, right? That he's talking about. What is usually translated eternal life. Um, and yeah, just increasingly, by the way, the longer we go through, the more convinced I become that eternal life, it's not that it's a bad but it's an inadequate translation of that phrase, the life of the age, um, the life of the age to come, right? It is because it's not just eternal life. There's the risk in any case that the phrase eternal life, that an English reader is going to think that that's just about the duration, right? Um, we we often tend to think about the duration of life, right? And one of the things that is really attractive about the promises of God is a life with unlimited duration, and it feels like that's what we're being promised. But of course, and I'm not saying we're not being promised that exactly. What I am saying is that there's much more to it than that. Um, it's not just a life that doesn't end. That so again, or to put it another way, I don't think that when when he talks about the life of the age, uh, I certainly don't think he is talking exclusively about the duration of life. It's not just a quantitative term in that way. He's talking about the quality of the life. It's a totally different life that we are going to be abiding in, and that's going to be abiding in us. Um, just as, back in paragraph eight, he was talking about us being like God, right? It's his reference to the life of the age. Again, to think of eternal life in terms of like you'll be living, like you're living now, except it won't stop, right? Um, Again, it's so inadequate. He's not talking about a continuation. He's talking about a transformation, right? Something quite new. But anyway, sorry, this is me digressing. Okay, so passing, you know, uh, you know, leaving death and entering life, as he gives us there in verse 14. Um, then we talk about love, right? We know love by this. How do we know love? That he set out his psyche, his life for us. Um, Yeah, Deborah, I agree. Experience tells us that there has to be a qualitative difference. If life goes on forever as it is now, I don't want it. Right, exactly. Um, that doesn't sound like a blessing at all. Um, of course, of course, Deborah, I immediately think of Dracula, right, as one contemplation on that question of longevity, right? Alternative mechanisms to achieve longevity. There are lots of stories about how one can prolong life, right? One can achieve uh, continuity of life, and they're usually horror stories. Agreed. In any case, uh, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers and sisters. So we have, as we were talking about before, this irony. We are moving out. I was talking about, like, as houses, right, or like street addresses, right? We're moving out of the death house and into the life house, and it was both the prepositions and the verb in that verse that really suggested that the passed out of, right? That's the verb that is used like when you leave town, right? When Jesus departs from one town and goes into another town, that's the verb that gets used. And also uh, we have passed. You remember that many of the translations say passed from death to life, which sounds like you're shifting from one state to another or something like that. When the prepositions suggest that you're going out of something and going into something else. Again, like leaving a house or going into a house. So if we move into life, right? We move into the life place. We do that by laying down our lives. Like it's correlated. At the very least, it's correlated with, right? Um, uh, Laying down our psyche for others, just as Jesus laid down his psyche for us, and of course did not give up his Zoe, his life in this larger sense. And then we get the twist that you don't see coming in the English in verse 17. Whoever now might have the goods of the world. Even in the interlinear, it's translated goods, but that's not the word. The word is bios, which means life. Now it can also mean, remember we talked about this word before because we encountered it before, and we'll look back at that in a second. It can also mean living, like what you need to sustain your livelihood. So um, when the poor widow puts her whole livelihood in the in the in the contribution box, it's her bios in this way. um yeah. Oh no, sorry, this is the woman who had and also, yeah, the woman who had spent all of her living on physicians, I think, also. Um so the point is not, again, as always, okay, almost always, I'm not saying that this is a bad translation, but it is inadequate, as all translations are, which is hard. But also, it doesn't pick up on the play that he's. I mean, I think the fact that he uses all three Greek words for life, right here within just a couple sentences, right? Passing from death to Zoe, he laid down his psyche, and now whoever has bios. Um, And if I recall, is it, yeah, right. Bios to Cosmo, life of the world. Whoever has the life of the world. Um, and I think, again, going back to the usages, um, it's, huh. Sorry, I'm looking at the usage in Timothy. It's not a common word, bios. It doesn't come up all that much. When it does come up, it tends to refer to money almost exclusively in the New Testament, I mean. Of course, yes, the when the older son and the prodigal son says that this one has devoured your wealth with prostitutes. He's devoured your bios, right? Your living. Um, I was looking at Timothy's here. Hang on, let me look at this for a second. I'm curious. Let's see. No one, I'm not even going to talk about the serving as a soldier verb. That's really interesting. Entangles himself in the affairs, pragmateis, that's pretty clear. The pragmateas of this bayou, right? That the one having that he might please the one enlisting him. Um, that's really interesting. One of the things that I'm interested in here is just of this life. One of the things that I think is so. Let me explain a little bit more why I'm interested in Paul's usage here in Timothy. You'll notice that in almost all of the other usages of the word bios, um, they don't translate it life, living, wealth, substance, right? So I'm thinking has devoured your substance. Uh, you know what I mean? Like it's, but rarely do they just say life. Um, and that seems to me, it seems to me, but I mean, like the word bios obviously means life, right? Um, that is, that's like the literal translation, but it seems that um, it is something that's used metaphorically almost every time that it's used. Okay. Yeah, and then we get the two usages, the one that we're looking at right now and the one that we're going to be looking back at soon in First John, and that's it. It only occurs 10 times in the New Testament. Yeah. So this one is definitely uh the third of three as far as the life word usages are concerned. But do you see what I mean about metaphorically, right? Um uh I mean to sorry, this just kind of occurred to me. Uh if the word bios, I think technically, of course, is what it means. But I keep saying bios. Why? Because of biology, of course. Like I'm used to pronouncing it in English. I'm used to pronouncing the word that way, and that's what was just making me laugh. Um, you would, if the word bios only meant wealth in the way that it tends to get used in the New Testament, then biology departments would be the same as economics departments in colleges, right? Um, the study of life, biology, right? Um, means living things. So again, the metaphor clearly seems to be that which enables you to stay alive, right? Um, what you have to live on. Uh, this one is an inch. Well, we'll come back to that one in a second. Yes, like all your living to divide your living. between your two sons, and then one of them goes and devours that living. Um, yes, yes. Now this one, we know this one, yes, in the parable of the sower, right? Yes, that some seed, having fallen into the thorns, um, this is Jesus interpreting it, right? The ones that fell into the thorns. These are those, um, it's hard to read this in chart form. I like it better in its regular form. Um, and under cares and riches and pleasures, hedonon, pleasures of life. There we go. Are choked and do not mature. See, again, here's another one where he's actually using it not metaphorically to refer to living or your, like again, like your money that will support your life. He talks about the pleasures of life. Um, Yeah. He says, DeVore says, now I can't stop thinking about devour your living if you were to translate it life instead, especially after your mention of Dracula. Yes, not devour your life in the Dracula sense, clearly. But no, I mean, again, I think that seems pretty clear. I mean, like, it's pretty clear that the prodigal son, for instance, does not devour the bios, the biological life of his father, right? Um, and and frankly, even if he had, that is, I'm sure the father's life has been damaged in some ways, right, by the cares and grief that he has been undergoing for his son. Um, Yet I also don't get the impression that that's what the older son would be thinking of, right? When he says that, right? When he talks about him devouring your living, um, he's clearly talking about the money. Um, but yes, cares, riches, and pleasures of life, of bio, to bio. Um, yeah, I'm wondering. Never mind. I'm not going to try to parse the details of the syntax of this sentence. Just interesting that this talks about life, not living, right? Again, this is not saying you couldn't translate the word bio here as like wealth or substance, right? Clearly. Um, but it obviously is clearly referring the pleasures of life in the context of cares, riches, and pleasures of life. Um, Referring to the life of this world, right? This life, as this is very similar to Paul's usage in Second Timothy that we were just looking at, right? Um, yeah, so it's clear how um, it's clear how bios here is hmm, okay. I say it's clear, and then as I try to finish the sentence, I'm like, actually, that's not clear. Uh, how do we understand these three words, Zoe and psyche and bios? I'll try to pronounce it the Greek way, bios. Um, Psyche, I think the best way is Hea was suggesting when we were talking about it. Um, the um, Psyche seems to be the Greek version of the Hebrew nephesh, which means a living soul. It's like what makes you a person. Um, when life is breathed into Adam, it's the nephesh that's breathed into Adam, and he's made a living soul. Um, the nefesh is like what makes you you, basically. Um, what makes you a living person. Bios is your life, like how you survive and how you live day to day, right? Zoe, see, it's interesting. It's Zoe that is placed up against Thanatu, death, right? When we are told, as we were earlier in this paragraph, that we have a choice of two home addresses, right? What are you going to enter as your home address in all those online forms? Is it going to be Thanatu or is it going to be Zoe? Is it going to be life or is it going to be death? Um, it's Zoe that is given as the alternative to death, right? Um, but yeah, Susan, the practical aspect of life, bios, not just I guess the what we would call the biological life. Um, uh, though I suspect, I wonder, I wonder in Greek, if you came upon like an animal lying in the field, right? And you were asking like, is it alive or is it dead? I wonder what word they would use for living there. Like, does it have life? Would they say bios in that case? Um, they would. I don't think they wouldn't say psyche. That's a different thing, right? Um, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I wonder. Um, you would think Zoe, Susan, so that's why it's the fundamental pairing that he uses, um, that John uses with Zoe and Thanatu, right? Whereas Bios is clearly practical, and the usage in the New Testament plainly is about the practicalities of life, especially money, right? Um, as I say, you can sometimes translate it wealth. Okay, right. So when you're thinking about light and dark, life and death, you're in Greek, you're generally going to say Zoe. So when you're talking about life as a principle, right? Um, like if you're saying something like, if you have that "life is good" slogan, and you were and in Greek, you would say Zoe, talking in those terms, probably, right? Whereas bios is practical. How can you live? How do you keep yourself alive? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Um, but let's stop guessing and let's look at John's own usage because we do have a precedent for this, of course, as we were looking at. Let's go back and reread paragraph 6. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So notice again the very first thing that he emphasizes about the world. Do not love the world. Um, he doesn't just say, do not love the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Sounds like world and Father are, sort of on the same level in a sense, logically speaking. Um, but he immediately adds, do not love the world nor the things in the world. For all that is in the world, now we're getting back to defining what the things are: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And that's, of course, where we get bios before in First John. The boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away, and also its lust, its desire. but the one who does the will of God abides forever. Abides to the age. Okay. Um, let's glance back. So where are we at? Verse 15. Okay. I want to see how he's using bios there. Okay. Do not love ton cosmon, nor things. He's speaking vaguely. This is the or that stuff in the world. He doesn't use a noun at all. That's really interesting. So he speaks vaguely about it. So he doesn't actually refer to things. Um, the noun things is being included because in English we kind of need a noun there, and he doesn't use one. It's a really vague pointer article. Do not love the world nor that stuff in the world. I'm going to go with stuff instead of thing, or that which is in it. Yeah, Devora, exactly. Do not love the world or that which is in the world. Yes, that which is in the world. The world stuff. If anyone should love the world, and the love word is agape here throughout, if anyone should agape the cosmo, then the agape to patros, the agape of the Father, is not in him. Uh, in him en auto, in him in that abiding sense, right? As we're that mene sense, as we'll see later on, because all that is en to cosmo, all that is in the world, all that is in the world, like the love of the Father is not in you if you love the world, all that is in the world, the desire of the sarkos, the flesh, and the desire of the eyes, ophthalmon, and the vaunting, boastful, and the vaunting of to bio, the pride of life, boastfulness. As I recall, yes, two usages in the New Testament. Um, boastings, arrogance, and the arrogance to bio, the arrogance of life. Um, is not ek to patros, is not from out of the Father. And this now we know because we've seen this many times, right? The ek2 construction. This is ek2, not in the sense of emerging out of, but this is in that's the geological, listen to me, genealogical sense, right? Like you're out of your parents, right? This stuff, this world stuff, this is not a descendant of the Father, right? Remember how ek2 is used back in paragraph 9. I said paragraph 11 again at the beginning of the class, didn't I? Darn it. I keep messing that up. Anyway, it's paragraph 10. Ek2 patros is not from out of the Father. It's not a child of the Father, but out of the world. Just like we're going to get ek2 out of the Father and out of the evil one, right? Up in paragraph 9. Yes. And the world is passing away. It's leaving. And the desire of it. But the one doing the will of God, mene, abides to the age. Okay. Right. The vaunting, the arrogance, the boastfulness of bio. So this paragraph is really important for understanding our main verse today. Not only because it's the other time that bio, life, life of the world, is used, but because of the word cosmo, right? This is the paragraph which has introduced the idea of cosmon in this sense. You'll remember we use the word cosmo in one other sense, and that's how Jesus was the propitiation for the sins of the whole world, right? Um, but we talked about how this paragraph clearly is introducing the concept of the cosmo the cosmos in a new way, right? Do not love the world, nor the things in the world, nor the world stuff, nor that which is in it, Devora, as you say. Um, so when we go back to 3, whoever might have the the bion to cosmo, the life of the world, and might see the brother of him having need. So look at the okay. Um, look at the parallelism of the verbs. I mean, this is the verb have, which is a really common verb, right? But the construction, whoever hos. Hang on a second. Let me not gloss over that. For John, this is an unusual construction. Think of how many times we have come across an English translation that says whoever, right? Whoever does this. There we go. Whoever has worldly goods. And remember, that's almost never how he actually constructs it in Greek. Normally in Greek, he uses that um that that prepositional construction, right? If I just looked at this in English and you'd ask me to guess the Greek syntax that it's translating, whoever has worldly goods, I would have assumed by now, by this point in John, right, in our study, I would have assumed that he was saying the worldly good having one, right? Like each worldly good having one, all the world, yeah, each of the worldly good having ones, right, is normally how he would have expressed it. And you remember the thing that I keep emphasizing is that by constructing things that way, the way that he so often does, right, each of the sinning ones, right? So, translated, I mean, there are lots of really good examples of this back in the previous paragraph, right? Uh, yeah. Right. No one who is born of God practices sin. Anyway, yeah. So, like, let's just glance back here for a second. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Yes. The passhole. Anyone not practicing righteousness. Yes. Anyone not practicing righteousness. This is, what is this, verse 10, right? Um, each of the, but again, it's not anyway. Even once again, in the interlinear, it's using the preposition, but it's not a preposition. Each of the not practicing righteousness ones. It's not how we construct things in English. Anyone who does not practice righteousness. But it doesn't say anyone. He doesn't use the preposition. So again, the point I've been making several times over the last many sessions is there's a difference between using a preposition. If you use the preposition, the emphasis is on the preposition. Anyone who does not practice righteousness. Can you imagine? Isn't it easy to imagine a sermon on this verse that would lay special emphasis on that pronoun? Anyone who does not practice righteousness. And the irony is, not that that would necessarily be a bad sermon, but the irony is that pronoun isn't there in the Greek, right? It's how we would say it. But where his emphasis is not in the preposition, anyone who does not practice righteousness. It's entirely on the verb, on the practicing righteousness. Each of the not practicing righteousness ones, everybody who falls in the not practicing righteousness category. And again, the literal definition is not different, but the emphasis is different. And that's how he does these things. Back in verse 6, as I recall similarly. Yes. Pas ho en auto menon hemertenai. Anyone in him abiding. No, literally, each of the abiding in him ones does not sin. Each of the abiding in him ones. Right? So again, no preposition, just the um, just the participle there. But in verse 17, we get a preposition, an actual, honest to God preposition. Whoever now. Yeah. It's just there it is. Relative pronoun. We got a preposition. Sorry, pronoun. Pronoun is what I meant to say. Boy, I'm misspeaking a lot today, which does not help things. Um, yeah, yeah. Who, which, it's just, that's literally the word whoever. Right? By whom? Yeah. Yeah, it's a relative pronoun. Whose, in whom, whoever, but whoever keeps, whosoever shall kill. Right. It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife. So in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus uses this all the time. I mean, this is going to come up a lot. It's just it's a relative pronoun. Um, right. And whoever marries her, who is, uh, divorced, commits adultery. Yep. Yep. Um, interesting. With what measure ye meet, it shall be measured unto you. Yep. Yep. Okay. Whoever now, now, it, huh, now is just, yeah. Um, huh. Anyway, okay. Os. Okay. Sorry, I just the now is sort of striking me. Has he used that much? Let me just indulge me for a second. This is it. I want to see John's usage. Give me all 2,810 occurrences, please. And I want to go all the way down to, it's going to take a little while. You won't give me them? I can't see them all? I want to know where it occurs in John. No? It occurs so often. Oh, it just means, it's just because it's just used as a conjunction. It just means and, but it's not Kai. Yeah. If it's and, it's going to come up quite a lot. I'm wanting to see the first John usages because I'm not, it just especially in this context. Whoever now, what does he mean by now? Hmm. Yeah. Tricky. Um, Whoever now. Well, okay, wait. Let me get back to the verbs I was talking about before. Whoever now might have the bios, the bion to cosmo, Kai, and might see the brother of him having need, Crayon. Oh, that's really interesting. And might close up the heart of him from him, the heart of him from him. How is the love of God? How the love of God abides in him. Okay. So the obvious parallel of the verb, then the moods of these verbs are really important, right? You can feel it even in English. You can feel that this sentence is heavily in the subjunctive, right? Whoever might have the goods of the world and might see the brother of him having need, right? Um, uh, and might close up the heart of him. Those are all sub. No, they are not all subjunctive. Yes, that might have the goods, might see the brother, and might close up the heart. Those are all subjunctive. The having need is not, however. This is, yeah, present. It's used as a participle. So this is all describing the brother. Yes. Okay. So having the brother of him having need. That's all adjectives describing the brother. This is what you might see. So the main verbs are all in the subjunctive. Whoever now might have the goods of the world and might see the brother of him, might see the brother of him having need, and might close up the heart of him. How does the love of God abide? Present, indicative, active. How does the love of God abide in him? You can begin, I think we can begin to see why he's not using the normal POS-HO construction. Each of the having the bios of the world ones, because you have these three theoreticals together, right? If in theory, there are lots of ways to use the subjunctive, but one of them is to propose a theoretical, right? And that seems to be what he's doing here. Whoever theoretically has the goods of the world and theoretically sees the brother of him, the uh, need having brother, and theoretically closes up the heart of him from him. And if those three subjunctive conditions align, if you have the goods of the world, and if you see your brother, the need having brother, and if you close up your heart from him, then how is the love of God abiding in him? Right? Um, yeah, yeah. The parallel I was looking at was the use of the verb of the having verb, right? Um, I don't know. I don't know how common this expression is, having need in this way. If need, crayon is something that you usually have. Um, looks like it is. Encanto, let's see. Um, I have need to be baptized. Yeah. I need to be baptized of thee, says John the Baptist to Jesus. And God knows what you need before you ask. Okay, that's a like a echete. Look, there it is right there. Right? Right? It's echonta, but yeah. Yeah, that's it. Oh, hang on. What did I just do? Just did something weird. Yeah, no, I don't want to go back to John 2. Thanks. Okay. Um, yeah, so here, um, in English, in the Sermon on the Mount here, um, knows what you need before you ask. The English verb need is used to translate the phrase that with a noun, have need, echete crean. Yeah. And seems to be same thing here in Matthew 9. Um, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, who have need of a physician. Yes. Yep. Um, the Lord hath need of him, of them. Yep. Yep. What further need do we have of witnesses? Asks the Sanhedrin. Yes. Okay. In fact, it almost always says that. How about in John? Yep. There it is again. Because he did not have need of anyone. Look, you can see it like right up there. That verb is right there with that noun every time we see it. He who has bathed needs only. Yes. Has need only. Okay. All right. I think I've answered my question. How common is that phrase? Exceptionally common, practically universal. Every time the word crayon is used. But hang on a second. Let me go back to the other question. Um, need, necessity. Is it? Huh. All right. I don't have time to read everything that Little and Scott have to say about it. Um, the thing that I was crayon, starting with the Cairo, it reminds me of Chrisma, um, the anointing, also of charis, meaning gift or grace. But I don't think it is, it's not obviously connected with either one of those things. Okay. Having need and having the goods of the world. Again, there's the way that those are constructed, even though those are common constructions. That second one certainly is. The first one, I'm less sure. We haven't seen the word eke, have, connected with the goods of the world. Um, spend, waste, devour, yes, but not have so much. But notice the balance that he's creating here. On the one hand, on the one side, you have the one who has the goods of the world, and the other side, you have the one who has need. They both have something, right? And they're sort of parallel to each other. One has the goods, one has the bios, and the other one has the need. Um, also, this is not the word I was expecting to find for see. Let me, theore, huh? Let me go back for a second. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have heorakamen, which is the word I would have expected, seen with the eyes. It's the one we've gotten most often. That which we have gazed upon. Huh. I don't even know how to pronounce that many theaome. Theaome. We just pronounce all those vowels separately, huh? Theaome. theaume. Oh boy, I can't even stress that one. Um, to behold, to look upon, compared to seeing abroad, because we're not hero common, which again is the verb he's most commonly used for see. Deore. Not quite the same. To look at, to gaze. Okay, when you behold him from far off, Mary comes to see the grave. How does John use his word? Skipping down to John. Okay, okay. When they saw the miracles. Ah, the Samaritan woman at the well says, Sir, I see, Theoro, that you are a prophet. Right? They saw the signs, they saw the miracles, the signs. They see Jesus walking. Everyone who beholds the Son, what then if you see the Son of Man? Okay. My word, he will, right. He shall never see death. John 8. Um, and yeah, the um man who was born blind. Oof. Okay. John's usage, I'm thinking in particular of he shall never see death. Um, and the Samaritan woman's usage. I perceive that you are a prophet. I see you're a prophet. And then, like in John 6 here, this is the will of my Father, that everyone seeing the Son and believing in him should have the life of the age, and I will raise him up in the last day. Yes, that everyone beholding, seeing. Hmm. Okay. I was, I would have guessed, and I would have been wrong, that the seeing word here was one of the two words that was in verse one. That's why I went back there. Because remember how there were the two, those who saw and those who gazed upon. Remember we talked about that ages ago, back in session number one. We were looking at verse one. Um, this is neither of those, but there is a one of the things that seems to me, just looking over these usages, it seems to have something to do with like recognition, right? Even when Mary goes to see the tomb, it's very much not like something that was just in her field of vision, right? Um, she's going there to look at the tomb to see that in order to remember him, to think about him. When they beheld him, when they saw him, they fell down before him. Right. Jesus sees the man who had been demon possessed. Yes. Yeah. Recognition, perception, understanding seem to be associated with this word. And that does seem important here. You don't just see, your need having brother. You notice it, right? You perceive. So you're not just seeing your brother, you're perceiving the needs of your brother. Okay. So whoever might have the goods, might see, and might close, might see the brother having need, and might close up the heart of him. And these are all of these verbs are verbs we haven't been looking at. Cleo, Cleo, to shut up. Like you close the door when you pray in Sermon on the Mount. Oh, the hypocrites who are shutting up the kingdom and not letting people in. Ooh, it's also what happens to the heavens when it doesn't rain. Yeah. How about in John? So this is what happens to doors, mostly. So like the doors were shut when Jesus stood in the midst of them. Yeah. The prison house is locked, right? Yeah. Okay. Boy, in Revelation it comes up a lot. With the power to shut up the sky, to shut and seal the abyss. Its gates will never be shut. The gates of the New Jerusalem will never be shut. Shut is such an unattractive English word. Cleo is kind of nicer. Cleo is fun because it's almost onomatopoeic, isn't it? Cleo, the sound of a door closing. Kind of prefer close rather than shut as an English translation, just because it sounds similar. Okay, Clese, close like a door. Shut up the Shutting up the heavens to prevent rain from happening, like a drought is the closing of the heavens, um, is seems particularly relevant in this instance. I'm thinking about God sending the rain upon the just and the unjust, right? The blessings of God being distributed, um, and closing up your heart here. And splunchna, we certainly haven't seen in this letter so far. The inward parts. It's talking about your organs. Yeah, your spleen, right? Oh, yeah, it's what gushes. It's what gushes out of Judas after he hangs himself. Oh man. Yoy. It's bowels. It's what the King James translates as bowels. Yeah. Oh my goodness, your guts. This isn't your heart, it's your guts. I mean, I know it's all metaphorical. Um, yes. Philippians 2:1. Sorry, I'm laughing because I remember being young and looking at the King James translation and reading. I remember young me being deeply confused by Philippians 2:1 in the King James. If there is therefore any encouragement in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels and mercies, as it translates it in the King James. And I remember asking my parents, being like, "What does bowels mean?" And they're like, you know, it's your guts." um, And, but basically, like when I discovered that bowels is like where your poop comes from, and I'm like, why is he talking about that? I don't understand at all. Um, uh, and of course, what this tells you, so it's complicated. Um, yeah, yeah, that was the verse that really threw me. Um, uh, because in every other usage, the word bowels is very frequently, as we could see in those little charts, those lists. Bowels is the King James usually translates this word bowels, and uh, what this shows you is, I mean, this is all a cultural thing, right? Um, how how did they understand how the body worked? What parts of the body did they associate with um, different emotions or experiences, right? And in different cultures, it's very different, right? My understanding is that Hebrew doesn't even have a word for brain, like the stuff that's in your head. There's not even a word for that. Um, so, like the distinction that we make in English very prominently between head and heart, right? Between your mind and your feelings, um, is a distinction entirely alien to Hebrew. Like that doesn't even happen because they didn't have another term. They used heart to refer to both. Your where you do your thinking and where you do your feeling. Again, we distinguish between those, but that's a cultural thing, right? That's just how we think about it. Similarly, bowels um, tells you something about how they thought about that in the 17th century, early 17th century, 16th and 17th century, let's say. They the bowels were the seat of compassion. Um, Yes, Devora, exactly. That when you in deep emotion, you sometimes feel a kind of physical pain in your gut. Yes, exactly. Like, oh, that hit me deep down, we would still say, right? That's very deep, is what they would say, right? They'd be talking, and we still talk like when we talk about having a gut feeling, right? We still kind of remember this sort of association with guts and with the guts and the intestines. Um, and again, this is not even about the state of medical knowledge, right? This isn't even about understanding what these organs actually do in the body, because we know full well that the heart has nothing to do with feelings and emotions, and yet we still use that metaphor all the time, right? Um, so, so yeah, it's a cultural thing. It's what is culturally associated with these different feelings. Um, so if splanchna is the guts, the bowels, the King James bowels. The heart is not a bad word. Um, Scott, is the Splanchna deceitful above all things and desperately wicked? Do you think? Splachna, yeah. It's right. It's not Splanch. It's just, sorry. Sometimes I give in to the temptation to pronounce things in ways that amuse me, right? Splanchna is funnier than Splachna. But uh Splunk, but it's the Chi. Splunk. Really, I shouldn't lose any chance that I get to say because we don't get to in English. Um, yeah, I don't suppose there's anybody who has a Septuagint handy and can look it up about the heart being desperately. Hmm. No, sorry, I was thinking of a different passage. I was thinking of an Old Testament passage, but that's not that one. Um, yeah, yeah, Splachna. Splachna. Um, yeah. I mean, it's pretty much your guts. You don't want to close up your guts. Hmm. What's what's really interesting to me about this, that we're talking about guts here, is that by talking about the splachna, he seems to really be talking about feelings. Seeing, perceiving, right? Recognizing the need of your brother will arouse feelings in your guts, right? It will stir, sorry, it will stir your bowels in not in that way. Yes, it will, I mean, it will stir up your feelings, right? But you can close your heart. You can close your guts. You can resist that feeling. It's the feeling element of this that seems to me that is to me unexpected. He's not um he's not he's not talked about that very much. He doesn't talk about your feelings when you're living in death or life, right? When you're moving out of death and moving into life. He's not talked about our feelings guiding us, right? How do you know if you're if the love of God is in you? It has nothing to do with how you feel, right? How do you know? If you keep his commandments, right? How do you know that you know God? If you keep his commandments. Um, John has been very interested in what you do and in what you say, right? One who says this but does this other thing. That's been his paradigm all the way through. I'm trying to think of any other point in which our feelings um, Susan says they're older and fouler feelings in the deep places of the body. Yes, good feelings too, apparently, but deep feelings, right? Sorry, little Casa Doom humor. Um, yes, yes. Um, but do you see what I mean? Like, he's not talked about feelings. I'm trying to remember if there's been any point at which he's talked about feelings in this way, like how you feel about things. It's all been about what you choose, what you say, what you do, what you love. Back to paragraph 6, right? To love the world and the world stuff versus loving God. To have the world stuff in you instead of the love of God in you. And because that's where he's going. Whoever, whoever now, um, whoever now, the three theoreticals might have, might see, might close. How does the love, the agape to Theou, how does the love of God abide in him? How is it? That's the love of God, mene in auto, abide, abides in him. And that's not subjunctive, right? That's indicative. How is it that the love of God abides in him? How could the love of God be abiding in somebody who has, sees, and closes? If you close your guts, yeah, splachna. I'm not. uh, I don't want to lean too heavily into the feeling element of it. It just, as I say, it feels different. I'm trying to see to remember if he's given us any indication um, that our feelings are aligned this way. Yeah. If the love of God abides in you. Well, it is compassion, um, but it's he doesn't use that word. Like he doesn't talk about like compassion can just be an action, right? But your guts, he's talking about your guts. It's a feeling thing. It's totally a feeling thing. Deep feelings. And it's clearly bad. Um, it's clearly bad to close up your guts. That's really hard to keep saying without laughing. Um, uh, but yes, you don't want to close up. Yeah, the deep-seated feelings that I can't see any other way to read splunchna here. And again, uh yeah, this is a door that should be open. This just seems a new idea. And I feel like it's an important new idea. I believe it's an important new idea. Notice the, sorry, I'm kind of fumbling with this because I hadn't been thinking about this at all. Just a new thought I'm trying to work through right now. Because it seems to imply the fact that they use, as we all use, again, almost everybody, most many cultures use this kind of biological metaphor for feelings, right? As if the feelings live somewhere in your body. We might differ where it lives, right? Brain, heart, spleen, kidneys. Kidneys come in in the King James. Um, to try the reins or the heart. Reins, Reins in the King James. That's kidneys. Um, uh, I didn't even get to that verse, so I didn't ask my parents that one. Um, but anyway, so yeah, there are different places where we situate feelings or and even different feelings. Um, uh, they had elaborate theories about this in the Renaissance, actually, like your spleen. Your spleen is the seat of anger and laughter. Anger and laughter are the two things that come from your spleen. Everybody knows that. Um, anyway, the point is there are lots of different associations, but the fact that he's referring to guts, the fact that he's doing this kind of biological, this kind of, well, organic association, right? Really suggest yes, Devore. That's exactly the Shakespeare line that shows it most clear. That angels who, if they had our spleens, would all themselves laugh mortal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. They'd laugh themselves mortal. That's from Measure for Measure. Um, yes, yes. Um, yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's as I say, that stuff changes culture to culture and over time. We don't talk about things much. There are still some relics to how they talked in the 17th century nowadays. But it changes over time. It changes culture to culture. But the point is, it's that kind of thing, right? Um, And in this context, it's clear that it's talking about feelings to close up your heart. Whatever organ you use to translate splachna, whether you say heart or whether you say guts or whether you say spleen, it's still clearly alluding to the feelings of compassion that are stirred within you or ought to be stirred within you. No, that are stirred within you. He doesn't say, notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, whoever now might have the goods of the world and might see the brother, the need having brother of him, and might not care at all, right? And may not feel any stirrings whatsoever. How is the love of God? He doesn't say that, right? He assumes everybody's going to feel that in their guts. Everyone's going to have that stirring of compassion, that impulse to compassion. The question is just whether you close up your guts or not. You can have that feeling, you shut the door on it. And if you do, how is it that the love of God is abiding in you? That motion, that closing up of the guts is obviously a sign, a clear sign that the love of God is not abiding in you. If it were, you wouldn't do that. I mean, that's the clear intent of the hypothetical question that he's asking here, right? There was a rhetorical question. How does the love of God abide in him? Again, can you explain that to me? How that's possible? How do we know that we know God? Well, we got that back in paragraph 3. By this we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commandments, by what we do, right? The one who says this and does that other thing is a liar and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says that he abides in him ought himself also walk just as he walked. So we're walking like Jesus. That's what we ought to do. Ought just as he walked to walk. Right? Back from paragraph 3. Again, the emphasis here is all on doing and saying. How do we know that we are in him? If we are walking the way that he walked. But apparently, that also includes not closing our guts. Which suggests that our guts are leading us in the path that Jesus walked. Right? That's the really interesting thing to me. Now, keep in mind, let's not forget where we started this paragraph. I don't object to the translation of Adelphi as brothers and sisters. I have no objection to that. I don't think it's just, this passage isn't just for and about men exclusively, right? Women are included. So brothers and sisters is just fine. But there's one consequence of seeing Adelphi and translating it as brothers and sisters in our heads. And that consequence is forgetting about Cain, which is where we began, this paragraph, right? Not as Cain, who was ectupanero, who's of the evil one, and murdered his brother. And for what reason did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil, but his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised if the world hates you. The world is going to have feelings about you in their guts too, but they're going to be different feelings in their guts, presumably. The world is going to look at you and hate you. But if you look at your brother in need, your guts are going to stir you in a different direction. And better not close your guts, right? Anyway, so yeah, thinking about the word, he doesn't use the word natural, right? We know that not everyone, compassion isn't the only thing that can be stirred in your guts. And he knows this. He just warned us that the world is not going to feel something quite different in its guts towards us. And certainly Cain was stirred. Cain looked at his brother and was stirred not by compassion, right? For what reason did he slaughter him? Because his own works were evil, but his brothers were righteous. His own works were ponera, but his brothers were diakasone, right? Were righteous. Um, and he's going to come back to erga, the works, in the last line here. Um, I don't know what to do with this yet. So, you know what I'm really looking forward to? I'm really looking forward to um, trying to pull this stuff together. This paragraph is a lot, but we're coming to the end of our time here. Let's stop there. Um, Next time, we're going to end the paragraph with John's injunction to the little children. What we should do. We're going to end this in the, we just did a long subjunctive sentence, right? Our long theoretical, and then ask a rhetorical question. And he's now going to turn and end the paragraph with an imperative, with a command, right? Let's do this. Let's do this. And then we'll see how that brings together the stuff from the whole rest of the paragraph. Okay. Wow. That was a lot. There's a lot of word stuff, different word stuff here. New concepts. So I'd be interested to see how they play up in the second half of the epistle. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me today. It was quite an adventure here today. And we're coming to the very end, towards the very end of paragraph 10, not 11, paragraph 10. I keep saying the wrong thing. Anyway, but we're almost done with paragraph 10. So look forward to, we'll see if we can get to the end of the paragraph next time, and then we'll see if we can kind of try to put it all together. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. See you next time. Bye now.